Welcome to the 151st session of the North Carolina Annual Conference, brought to you by the 2nd District of the AME Church. Our 5-minute countdown to begin starts now. To begin. To begin. To begin. In 1 minute, we shall begin. And now, our program starts.
To our dedicated presiding elders, pastors, other clergy, district component committees, ministry leaders, and lay, inclusive of all of our children, youth, and young adults in the 2nd Episcopal District, and all others who have joined us in this historic 2020 virtual session of these series of annual conferences of the 2nd District. Aurelus and I greet you humbly with thanksgiving for God's blessings. Our God is and has existed for eternity and all-knowing, all-powerful, and ever-present in every time and space. Thus we still have hope and walk in faith, for we know His love endures forever. As we begin planning in January for our series of annual conference, this is not how Aurelus and I imagine the communication format of our annual conferences would be, that is virtually. Indeed, these past months has brought some of the deepest sorrows. The COVID-19 pandemic and the horrific death of George Floyd by the policeman's knee on his neck have changed everything except our deep love for you and the desire to keep you safe. These two catastrophic events, COVID-19 and the killing of George Floyd, were the tipping points for the American people and people all over the world. Nevertheless, we praise God that the closed church doors did not stop ministry. We're profoundly grateful for the numerous conference calls, Zooms, webinar meetings, and other media platforms that have kept us in touch and continuing our work of kingdom living and kingdom building. Though Aurelus and I have wished for other circumstances, indeed these past months have brought some of the deepest sorrows. Even so, the roll call lets us know how blessed we are to be yet alive and see each other's face, even though we have to see each other virtually. For those who've lost loved ones as a result of COVID-19, other health complications, and a range of circumstances, our heart ache with you, and we are praying for you. We can rest in the assurance that our loved ones are now at home with our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. We pray for those who are recovering in hospitals and at home. May these challenging and uncertain times find us working even closer together so that our families, our churches, our communities, our nation, and our world will all thrive. We thank the conference committees who have used their skills for countless hours planning, preparing for effective and efficient implementation of these two virtual annual conferences, or these 2-day virtual annual conferences. In these 2-day periods, we will cover all the essential business that we must cover and approved by the annual conference delegates for implementation. We are grateful to our presiding elders, pastors, annual conference officers, and all the members of the church for your creativity in utilizing social media and other forms of technology to get the word of God to the ears of listeners, both locally and globally. Greater is coming. Praise the Lord, everybody, and welcome. I want to thank the 151st session of the North Carolina Annual Conference for being present. We welcome all of our visitors from all over the country, all over the world. We recognize that these are very different and extreme circumstances under which we must do business. But we are excited about the challenge, but more than that, the opportunity that these challenging times presents unto the church. All around us today, we're challenged by the words of John Maxwell in his last book, Leader Shift, that talks about the fact that time is constantly moving. And real leaders understand how to shift, how to change, how to adapt, how to adjust in certain circumstances. I'm proud of the North Carolina Annual Conference, as I am of all of the conferences in the Second Episcopal District, because you have proven to be good leaders. You have managed to adapt. And in that adaptation, you've managed to be successful, and God has shown his favor. This morning, our first order of business, as I call to order this 151st session of the North Carolina Annual Conference. The first order of business is that of approving the agenda which you have before you. Understand you have 2 packets of materials if you are delegates to this meeting. You have the material that was provided pre-COVID, and you understand that that material is valuable, but we have had so many things to change in order to be relevant in this day and time. We've had to adjust to those changes. And then you have the virtual packet that has some updates. It does not negate what was provided to you before. It only adjusts and modifies the reports to fit this virtual setting. And so come on, join us in the conference now. And if you would now give us a motion to approve the agenda for the 151st session of the North Carolina Annual Conference.
Good morning, Bishop. Justin Nick. I move that we approve the agenda of the 151st session of the North Carolina Annual Conference.
Is there a second?
Good morning, Bishop. I approve the agenda for the 151st session of the North Carolina Annual Conference.
You second the motion, you mean?
Yes, I
Right.
second the
All
motion.
right. We thank you so very much. It has been properly moved and seconded for the approval of the written agenda of the North Carolina Annual Conference. You've heard the motion, ready for the question. I'll wait 20 seconds while you register your unreadiness. The way in which that is done is that you go to the Q&A. There are persons on the back side of this production that will allow us to know your unreadiness, and we await those unreadiness before we vote. 20 seconds. Not hearing any, not any being raised on for us. If you would go to the polling places now, she's putting it up, and vote your concern or your desire to accept or reject the motion on the floor. And the results. Thank you so very much, and the agenda has been approved. You've heard in the very beginning, before the pre-conference videos that allowed you to know how registration or how the roll call is being adjusted. We will have several opportunities for us to go through and make sure that you have registered your presence on the vehicles that are available to you and the different ways of getting in. Understand that the official Zoom record will be attached to the minutes of the annual conference, which also represents your attendance at the annual conference. This afternoon, or at least tomorrow morning, the final roll call will be taken. In just this afternoon, in the opening of the second session of this conference, we will hear from the secretarial staff to talk about the number of persons that they have not yet been able to give an accounting of. And that's not to mark you absent. That's just to put you on alert. If you hear your name, you need to do something and do it quickly. But tomorrow at this same time, if you have not registered by means of allowing us to know one way or another, and you must do that yourself, that you're not, that you are here and somehow your instrument did not follow the directions that they had given you to make sure that you were on your instrument and that you were using your own name so that they could see that you had actually registered to get in, you will be marked absent, and we don't want that to happen. So that being said, what the secretary is I call the secretary to the platform now, what we will do is to receive the transfers into this annual conference so that we might proceed. Madam Secretary and the secretarial staff, would you please come to the platform? I'm going to.
Good morning.
Okay. And we are asking y'all to move a little faster to get on the platform as you are called. The transfers to the conference are these, to my knowledge: the Reverend Justin Nix, transferring from the Washington Conference to the North Carolina Annual Conference. The
Yes.
The Reverend Marcus Wheeler
Yes.
is transferring from the Washington Conference to the North Carolina Annual Conference. We did not account for his name on the roll, and I'm sure that was just a presumption on the part of the staff, but he still needs to be transferred into the conference. The Reverend Kenneth Tart, transferring from the 7th Episcopal District into the North Carolina Annual Conference. Are there other transfers that I'm not aware of?
Not to my knowledge, Bishop.
All right. That being the case, we will await your first report on the absences or those that you have not been able to give an account of this afternoon as the first order of business for the second session of the conference. All right. Thank you so very much, Madam Secretary. May I now call for the conference organization recommendations read by Presiding Elder Evelyn Dunn, if she would come to the platform.
Yes, Bishop.
All right. Elder Dunn, would you please read the nominations for organization for the North Carolina Annual Conference? All of this information you have in your packets. And so if you can't see it clearly on the screen, you have the hard copy there as well. For those persons who might ask, and because we've done this a time or two now, for those persons who might ask that they have not received it yet, you have three options. One, you can just send an email to the office, which means that you will receive it, and make sure your email is correct, that we're using to send the information to, because we did have quite a few bounce backs. That will not be done today, but it will be done. You don't have to send it but one time. Sooner or later you will receive it. The second is ask your partner, ask your colleague, ask your delegate, ask someone who did receive it, just to send it over to you and forward the information to you. Or you could indeed make sure that you, as a third option, ask your presiding elder, and your presiding elder might be willing to provide it as well, so that you might have it hurriedly. Elder Dunn, we're ready for your nominations now.
Thank you, Bishop. We'd like to offer the following persons to constitute the organization for the 151st session of the North Carolina Annual Conference. Secretary, the Reverend Dr. Judah V. Johnson. Assistant Secretary, Reverend Pamela G. Taylor. Statistician, the Reverend Dr. Philip Blair. Assistant Statistician, the Reverend Janice Harris. Conference Finance Committee, Chairperson, the Reverend Edward Sloan. Treasurer, Reverend Dr. Teresa Holmes. Finance members, the Reverend Howard Johnson, the Reverend Thomas Nixon, the Reverend Dr. Owen Gills, Reverend Glenn Orr. Lay persons, Ms. Arlene Lawson, Secretary, Ms. Evelyn McCoy, Ms. Rebecca Sanders, and Ms. Carolyn Dixon. For our conference support staff, the recommendations are the Reverend James Shears and the Reverend Dewey C. Farmer. Conference trustees, Presiding Elder Evelyn Dunn, the Reverend Robert Good, the Reverend Teresa Holmes, the Reverend Michael G. Redd, Mr. Arvell Moore, and Ms. Irma Johnson as lay members. Judiciary Committee, Presiding Elder Evelyn G. Dunn, Reverend Thomas Nixon, Reverend Dr. Patricia Freeman, the Reverend Robert Bland, the Reverend Kathy Austin Kearney, and the Reverend Robert Good. Budget Committee, the Reverend Ruth Pugh, Reverend Edward Sloan, and Sister Tina McNair. Red Ink, the Reverend Galen Barber, Mrs. Arlene Lawson, and Reverend Robert Yarber. Seminary Education Fund, the Reverend Dr. Judy V. Johnson. Clergy Care Assistance Program, the Reverend Gloria Fields, the Reverend Veronica Murphy, and the Reverend Jonathan Ford. Clergy Recruitment 2024, the Reverend Galen Barber and the Reverend Christopher Edwards. Disaster Readiness Commission, the Reverend Keith Davis, the Reverend Jerry Pearson, and the Reverend Jermaine Robinson. Second District Community Development Corporation, clergy persons, Reverend Kathy Austin Kearney, and lay Reverend Sister Trifina Wiseman, and member at large, the Reverend Dr. Teresa Holmes. These we offer for consideration.
All right, can I have a motion to elect these persons to serve in the capacities which they have been recommended?
Bishop, I so move the nomination.
All right.
Second,
It's
Evelyn
been
Dunn.
it's been properly moved and seconded, moved by Reverend Odom, seconded by Reverend Dunn. You've heard the motion, ready for the question. I'll wait 30 seconds while you register your concerns. If there be any, you do it through Q&A, and those on the backside will so recognize the unreadiness.
Is that a surgical still on?
All right, not hearing any, and I assume that those who are managing on the backside have not seen any registered. Go to the polling place now and register your pleasure. All right, thank you so very much. These persons have been elected to serve for this year in the responsible places that you have been nominated. The next order of business, and with pleasure, I bring to the platform now Reverend Artie Odom, presiding elder in the North District, and Reverend Evelyn Dunn, presiding elder of the Southern District, to read their spreadsheets and budget assessment summary reports.
Thank you, Bishop, for the opportunity to serve. I thank you and the supervisor for your leadership, vision, guidance, and the way that you lead us by example in ministry. I want to thank my colleague, the Reverend Evelyn Gail Dunn, presiding elder, for all of her assistance. I want to thank also the pastors and the laity of the Northern District for the teamwork and the way they have worked with me and my team. Let me thank my assistant. Last but not least, let me thank my wife for all of her help in doing this. I am pleased to now to make my first report for the Northern District as presiding elder. The General Conference, $417. General Conference Sustentation, $3,460. Annual Conference Support, $1,731. Annual Conference Pre-Offering, $2,978. Sustentation, $13,958. SED Education Fund, $2,904. Peer articles, $6,708. Annuity insurance for presiding elder, $7,010. Annuity and insurance for pastors, $29,794. Quadrennial support, $2,640.75. Retirement support, $2,872. Total annual conference grand total, $126,472.75. Thank you, sir. This is my report.
All right, thank you very much. We'll come back to make comments collectively for both of you after we hear Reverend Dunn's, Presiding Elder Dunn's summary report as well.
Thank you, Bishop, and thank you for the appointment for this year. We are thankful to the Lord for the still, sweet, sizzling, supernatural Southern District that in spite of it all have come through by the grace of God. We wish to make the following report. General budget, $52,417. General Conference Sustentation, $3,526. Annual Conference Support, $1,962. Annual Conference Pre-Offering, $9,469. Sustentation, $13,275. SED Education Fund, $2,654. Periodicals, $4,447. Annuity and insurance for presiding elder, $2,815. Annuity and insurance for pastors, $29,515. Quadrennial support, $1,888. Retirement support, $1,455, for a grand total of $123,423, and we are grateful to God. Thus is the report.
Indeed. Can I have a motion to receive the summary reports from the presiding elders and presiding elder districts?
I so move to receive the reports, Bishop.
I second it, Bishop.
It's been properly moved and seconded that the reports be received. You've heard the motion. Are you ready for the question? And we pause for any unreadiness. I understand that Reverend Janice Harris is handling the back of this process to bring forth the unreadiness. You can register those as you see fit. While you're doing that, let me just commend, congratulate, and express appreciation to the presiding elders for a job well done. How grateful we are for your leadership. We realize that this part of North Carolina particularly has had so many different kind of devastations, and the church has proven to be stronger with God's help than anything that has come against it. And so we are grateful. We are extremely grateful to all of you for what you've done. This represents your efforts in the midst of difficult times. And so it is not taken lightly, but very seriously and much appreciated. Now, are there any other unreadiness? Are there any unreadiness? Not having seen or heard one, would you go to the polling place now and register your concern?
Bishop, this is Reverend Harris. There was someone who wanted to know the difference.
Let me hold on one second. And the motion has passed. And now, Reverend Harris, even though it's passed, let me hear the concern and maybe we can, go ahead.
The question was, what's the difference between the districts for annual conference pre-offering?
They have more churches on one than the other. Am I correct, elders?
Yes, Bishop, you are
Elders?
correct.
Yes.
All
Yes,
right.
you are correct.
All right, thank you so very much. Do appreciate it, and let me not forfeit this opportunity that's given to us now to not only express concern for the leadership, but for the family of the leadership, because we realize that every one of us are supported by somebody else and supported in ways that others can't support us. And so for both your spouses and your families, we say thank you. Thank you for being who you are to the leadership of the church, and the fact that you provide a service that nobody else can provide at times when nobody else can get to the elders. So thank you very much for sharing your spouses with the church. God bless you. All right, let me call forth the Board of Examiners now, please.
Good morning, Bishop. And to the North Carolina
Good morning.
Board of Examiners and to the North Carolina 51st.
If you could turn your volume up, just turn your volume up for us, please.
Bishop, can you hear me now?
I think if you turn your volume up just a little bit more, others can. I know that I can, but it's difficult for me. So if you could turn your volume up as high as it can go, that might help others who might have difficulties.
Good morning, Bishop and members of the 151st session of the North Carolina Annual Conference. The Board of Examiners beg leave to present our report. Dr. Freeman, the board secretary, will now come and read our report.
Good morning.
All right. Dr. Freeman, we're ready to hear you.
All right. Class of Admissions, the North Carolina Annual Conference Board of Examiners presents the
We're
following
turning the volume up for her.
admissions to the North Carolina.
Hold on, Dr. Freeman. We're gonna see if we can possibly help with your. I'm being told by those who are in the background of this management, if you could lean forward towards your mic, Dr. Freeman, your sound might be heard a little better.
Okay. How about now? Can you hear me?
It's a little better. It's a little better. Thank you.
Okay.
If you have it turned up as high as you can go,
Yes,
and
sir.
leaning forward, that's good. Okay, come on.
Let's try. Class of Admissions, the North Carolina Conference Board of Examiners present the following individuals requesting admissions to the North Carolina Annual Conference on trial. Yashonda Eileen Majette, age 50, Mount Zion, Wilmington, North Carolina. Michael Anthony McCray Sr., age 49, St. Luke, Fayetteville, North Carolina, New Hope. Class of Admissions, the North Carolina Conference Board of Examiners recommends the following individuals to be admitted on trial. Yashonda Eileen Majette, Michael Anthony McCray Sr.
Okay. Let me deal with each one of the class or the recommendations seriatimally. You've heard the board present two candidates. Both candidates they're recommending will be admitted on trial. What is your pleasure to the board's recommendation?
Bishop, this is Philip Blair. We move that they
Let's
be
get the
admitted
motion
on
first.
trial.
Reverend Blair, I'm sorry. Would you repeat your motion, please?
The motion is that Sister Majette and Brother McCray be admitted on trial to the North Carolina Annual Conference.
Second, Bishop.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure who made the second.
Cassandra Sparrow.
All right, it's been moved by Reverend Blair, seconded by Reverend Sparrow, that the recommendation of the Board of Examiners for admission be accepted. And you see what the recommendation is, that these two candidates be admitted on trial. You've heard the motion, read for the question. We'll pause 20 seconds while you register your unreadiness, if there be any, and we will wait 20 seconds while speedily Reverend Harris will report your unreadiness if there are any. Not hearing any, not seeing any. Would you please go to the polling place now to register your desire? All right, so it is that these persons have been admitted on trial. Congratulations. Just as a preface to this report to the conference, there has been nothing shorted in this process. All of these candidates have come and gone through the same cycle that they would have gone through had we had not the responsibility of presenting the conference virtually. And so they have all been examined, they have all been through the classes, and we thank God for what has happened as a result of the efforts of the board. You come on with the second recommendation, the second presentation.
North Carolina Annual Conference Board of Examiners present the following candidate of the first year class of studies: Yolanda Murphy, age 45, Murphy Chapel AME Church, Harold, North Carolina. The North Carolina Annual Conference Board of Examiners recommend the following candidate to be advanced to the second year of class of studies: Yolanda Murphy.
All right.
So move, Bishop. Gloria Fields.
It's been moved that the Board of Examiners recommendation of second year, moving to the second year class be accepted. Is there a second?
Gill, second.
It's been properly moved by Reverend Fields, seconded by Reverend Gill. You've heard the motion. You're ready for the question. We'll wait 20 seconds while you register your concern, and Reverend Harris brings it forward. Not hearing any, please go to the polling places to cast your desires. All right, so it is that the recommendation of the Board of Examiners that the first year class candidate be advanced to second year class. Thank you for your consideration. Go ahead to the next one, the second year class of studies.
Second year class of studies, there is none.
All right.
The North Carolina Annual Conference Board of Examiners present the following candidates for the third year class of studies: Leah Nicole Burt, age 35, St. Stephen's, Wilmington, North Carolina; Christopher S. Edwards, age 35, Glacier, Nevada, Nashville, North Carolina. That's a correction, Bishop, for Evergreen there. LaTanya Sharice Pickett, age 47, St. Stephen's, Scotts Hill, North Carolina; Sarah Ann Pierce, age 67, Bethel Curry, North Carolina; Samantha Nixon, age 42, Ohova, Aurora, North Carolina; Guy Sitberry, age 44, Mount Horeb, Evergreen, North Carolina. There's none.
All right. Please go back. And the recommendation of the board?
The recommendation of the board is that there's none in the, to be moved to the advance to the fourth year class.
All right, let me just pause long enough to say that though it may not be written explicitly, but it is inherently the tradition and understanding of this process, that if one registers oneself for the itineracy at the very beginning of one's commitment to say they want to be itinerant, is the acceptance of all the responsibilities that go along with being itinerant. And one of those responsibilities is that you complete a process. And so I'm encouraging us to move to and towards completion of a process. It is inherently noted that if you say you want to be itinerant, everything in that book which talks about the requirements of itineracy ought to be a part of the plan of action which every candidate should be meeting. And so I encourage you to move on with that process. All right, go on to the next one.
The North Carolina Annual Conference Board of Examiners present the following candidates of the fourth year class of studies. Dennis Darren Funderburk, age 53, New Light, Tabor City, North Carolina. Kimberly Page, age 61, St. James, Kennethville, North Carolina. The North Carolina Annual Conference Board of Examiners recommend the following candidate to be elected to be ordained itinerant elder in the African Methodist Episcopal Church, Dennis Darren Funderburk.
And in that recommendation, I assume that all of the requirements for ordination have been met.
Yes, sir, Bishop.
Yes, Bishop.
He graduated from where with his MDiv?
The Southern Baptist Theological College.
The where?
Southern Baptist. If I'm not, let me look at his paper.
Yes,
That's
Southern
correct.
Baptist Theological Seminary.
Yes, thank you.
All right. You've heard the report, the recommendation for fourth year class of study. What is your pleasure? Let me have a motion to do.
So move, Bishop. This is Theresa Holmes.
Reverend Holmes. And
Second by Gill.
it has been properly moved by Reverend Holmes, seconded by Reverend Gill, that the recommendations of the board concerning fourth year class of studies be accepted, and Reverend Dennis Darren Funderburk be elected to be ordained at the appropriate time. You've heard the motion read for the question. We'll wait 30 seconds while you help us. 30 seconds to register your unreadiness. All right, not hearing any, not seeing any, go to the polling places and express your desires. Thank you. All right, thank you so very much. And the recommendations of the board concerning fourth year studies and the election of Reverend Funderburk is so noted and approved. Continue, please.
North Carolina Annual Conference Board of Examiners presents the following candidate of local orders. Martha Ellen Jacobs, age 60, St. John, Hampstead, North Carolina. The North Carolina Annual Conference Board of Examiners recommend the following candidate to be elected as a local deacon in the African Methodist Episcopal Church, Martha Ellen Jacobs. I'm sorry, Martha Ellen Jacobs.
Okay, now I'm having to be elected or ordained a local deacon. I'm having trouble trying to figure out this picture with your recommendation.
What do you got with the picture, Bishop? What's that?
She's got a color on.
I'm trying to figure out this picture, all of the arraignments with this recommendation. Help me, somebody. Help me, anybody.
Are you looking at her? Caller?
Surely you are looking at the same thing I'm looking at. So I'm trying to figure out the recommendation and the picture.
I see the caller, Bishop.
And the robe.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Okay. And the recommendation says what?
A local
The orders.
A local what?
orders.
A local what, though?
Deacon.
Local deacon.
Okay.
Bishop, we apologize for that slip. I think we missed the photo. This was the incident.
No. It's not the photo that I worry about. It's the teaching that I worry about. If it indicates a lack of instruction to have candidates to understand what the adornment means to us. That's what I'm concerned about. That's what I'm concerned about.
I understood, Bishop. This is an old picture that should not have been included, and we apologize that it was. We understand exactly what you were saying. It was another affiliation, and we did not catch that.
Oh, I see. Okay. Go to the polling place and register your desire. Out of what church is this person? St. John Homestead. Okay. Okay. Thank you so very much. The report is adopted. The recommendations are adopted and approved. Go to the next one, please.
The North Carolina Annual Conference Board of Examiners recommend the following candidate be transferred to the North Atlantic Annual Conference of the 6th Episcopal District of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, Leah Nicole.
If those who are not on the platform, who are not speaking on the platform, would you mute your mics now? Who are on the platform, but you're not muted, mute your mics until the appropriate time. Go ahead. Would you read again, please?
Yes. The North Carolina Annual Conference Board of Examiners recommend the following candidate be transferred to the North Atlantic Annual Conference of the 6th Episcopal District of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, Leah Nicole Burke.
Okay. Okay. I don't know how this one. She is a what now? In terms of her classification?
She is a deacon.
Okay.
Itinerant.
But this is not an issue of the board then.
Mm-hmm.
The board doesn't do this. This is by request of the candidate. So this one we don't even have to take a vote on because this is out of the venue that the board has control over. And have we already received a request from her to be transferred?
Dr. Sparrow, have you received them?
She indicated that to us, yes, and we received confirmation from.
Okay, but
yes.
you understand that this is not under the authority of the board. The board merely allows the chair to know whether she's in good relationship with the board so we can report to the board, but the transfer has nothing to do with the board.
Understood, Bishop.
That has nothing to do with the board. That's by her request, and she just needs to send us a letter for request, but that has nothing to do with the board. So I won't entertain that. Let's go on to the next one.
The North Carolina Annual Conference Board of Examiners recommend the following candidate be re-obligated from the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church to the African Methodist Episcopal Church as an itinerant deacon. Michael Anthony McCray, Sr.
Okay, and I guess the board's report should include the why of his re-obligation as a deacon, in as much as the discipline says has other conditions on there. And I think only fair to the board to denote the whole of the responsibility of the board as relates to what the discipline says, in as much as he's coming from AME Zion Church as an ordained elder. The board could have accepted him in complete relationship, but because he has not yet completed, he's only a few hours away from completing the MDiv program, the board has a responsibility. It says if they meet the other educational requirements of the board of the denomination as well. And so he's in process, and we welcome him amidst us. Okay. What is the pleasure of the conference?
So move, Bishop, that he be re-obligated from the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church into the AME Church as an itinerant deacon.
Okay, and go ahead with the second.
Second, Sparrow.
It's been moved and seconded, moved by Reverend Gill, seconded by Reverend Sparrow. And you've heard the motion read for the question. I'll wait 30 seconds while you register your unreadiness. And while you're doing so, I am still asking the board to make sure that you quote in this recommendation what the discipline says, in as much as I know some things about what's going to happen at the end of this conference, and this recommendation needs to be a part of your report.
Yes, sir, Bishop.
All right, not hearing any, not seeing any. Go to the polling place and express your concern.
Bishop,
Yeah.
Reneth Griffin reported that Michael McCray was recommended to be ordained as itinerant elder.
I beg your pardon. The motion is passed, but you can take the polling down now. The motion is passed. We can answer any questions that you want to ask, but go ahead, please.
Mike McCray was recommended to be ordained as
Please
a.
announce, because we are virtual, please announce where the question is coming from.
It's coming from Randolph. It's coming from Randolph Griffin.
It's coming from Randolph Griffin, and the question is what now?
Michael McCray was recommended to be ordained as itinerant elder.
That's not what this says. And I am familiar enough with the process that I can tell you that that's not what is supposed to be done. The board has followed the process, and I don't know where he would get that from. But in all honesty, after knowing that the board has done due diligence, I'm sure, in finding out the classification, they have gone to the discipline, and that's the reason I need them to go back to, I think it's page 126, possibly 126, to look at and add to the report just what the discipline says. It could have happened if the educational requirements had been completed, and it would have happened, but that's not what the conditions and circumstances are. We commend and welcome Reverend McCray, but the process is clear. Are there other concerns or additional questions concerning this part of the report? It's already been approved, but we welcome the opportunity to at least try to bring understanding. If the board has another statement to be made, I welcome them to speak now. If the board does have another statement to be made. All right, are there any other concerns? Let's move on then to, is that the end of the report? No, go ahead.
The North Carolina Annual Conference Board of Examiners recommend the following candidates to be transferred from local deacon status to itinerant deacon status and placed in the third-year class of studies. Kimberly Walker.
All right. All right. I assume that the board has already done its due diligence in finding out and getting the form signed of intent. Is that right?
That's correct, Bishop.
And there is an intent statement to complete, as I made the statement earlier. They're inherent in the desire to be itinerant. It is understood that you are preparing to complete the process and to do what is necessary in order to complete that process. And the board has an intent statement from all candidates. Is that right?
That is correct, Bishop.
Okay, so this candidate has already signed an intent statement to complete the process and is fully aware of the differences in the obligations that she now is asking for.
That is correct.
All right, and I hope the secretary has taken note of each one of those questions that I asked for the record, in the record, for future need if necessary. You have heard the recommendation of the Board of Examiners concerning the transfer from local deacon to the status of itinerant deacon. You've heard the desires. What is your pleasure? Did I get a motion?
So moved, Bishop.
And
All right.
second. Oh,
It's been properly moved and seconded, moved by Reverend Gill,
Yes.
seconded by Reverend Sparrow. You've heard the motion. Ready for a question? I'll wait 30 seconds while you register your concern. Not hearing any, not seeing any, please now go to the polling places and register your desire. All right, thank you so very much. Does that end your report, Madam Secretary?
Sir, we just want to acknowledge the itinerant deacons that have been enrolled in seminary and those who are progressing in completing their Masters of Divinity and other candidates who have completed their specialized training for the Board of Examiners to enhance their ministry skills. We appreciate their commitment and they're strongly encouraged to pray for one another and continue to work and perseverance to complete their requirements for ordination as an itinerant elder in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. The Reverends Foster Barnes, Sylvester B. Coven, Ronald E. Davis, Jonathan D. Ford, Jeffrey Gainey, Doris Lindsley, Jacqueline Mitchell, Joseph Nixon Jr., Walter E. Patterson Jr., Eric Price Pollitt, Serena Reddick Lofton, Jeremy Robinson, and Joshua Stevens. And the congratulations and encouragements coming from the Reverend Dr. Ora Dale Sr., Chair, Reverend Dr. Cassandra Sparrow, Dean. That ends our report, Bishop.
Are all of these persons in seminary now?
No, sir. Some are taking extended classes or classes to enhance their education, but all of these are not in seminary, sir.
Okay. All right. Go back to the board's pictures. Let me acknowledge them, the board's pictures, not the advisors. And so each and every one of the board members, we thank you for your efforts this year. We look forward to, as the whole district revamps for the new way of doing business, we look forward to new leadership. We look forward to new ways of doing what these circumstances have brought on for us to do. Thank you so very much. Thank those who were advisors to the board, the presiding elders, and all others who made contributions one way or another to the success of this year, and looking forward to making sure that we are even more effective in the next year. Thank you so very much. Can I get a motion then to accept the board's report as a whole document, please?
Bishop, I move that the full report of the Board of Examiners be accepted by the conference.
Seconded, Cassandra Sparrow.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that the board's report be accepted with those modifications or necessary corrections as a whole document. You've heard the motion and ready for the question. I'll wait 20 seconds to have any registered concerns. All right, not hearing any, please go to the polling place and cast your desire. All right, thank you so very much. Thank you, board, for your work, and well done it has been. Thank you very much. Can I ask of us now, as we move forward with an understanding of what this day of commemoration is, all across our country, we are blessed of God to be a part of the celebration of homegoing of one who gave unselfishly of himself. Congressman John Lewis was one of, if not the youngest person to be represented in the movement during the time of King. He was certainly one of the youngest persons. He was tenacious, and his spirit grew into one of not being served, but one of service. All across the country, the National Council of Churches ask all the churches throughout America to ring the bells of the churches, if available, at 11 a.m. this morning. We are in conference this morning, and those who have access to the streaming of the service will get a chance to join in this service this morning as the other services that have gone on over the past 6 days. This morning, we thought it would be robbery if we did not share in that celebration in some way or another. Every now and then, every turn of every generation, God always produces that wonderful Moses that comes to leadership not because of their own gifts, but because of a spirit of servitude that God has placed in them, and God blossoms them where they are. Does that mean that those who have contributed in other ways are not equally as important? No. It means that we celebrate what God has done through this heroic giant amidst us. And today, as those who are helping us in this streaming process, in this virtual conference, we have put together a tribute to him. And so as we celebrate his life, we celebrate that which has gone before us, but we also celebrate the contributions of those who are now on the scene. And throughout the whole of the Episcopal District, our desire has been that everybody finds their place in being involved. Everybody can do something. Everybody can find their connection. Everybody can find a way in which they can make a contribution and be on the right side of history at this very critical time in history. And so we have invited Bishop William Barber of the Poor People's Campaign in each one of these conferences to come and share with us, as you will hear in the planning meeting, so many others who are on the front line, even in our own denomination and in our own communities, that we have invited in to just show us what we can do right where we are. So I ask that you would be with me in this memorial moment for Congressman John Lewis, followed by our own special guest, Bishop William Barber, the co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, who will also enlighten us, encourage us, inspire us to come on and find our place. Bishop Barber will be on sound only this morning, but he has been visual all the other conferences and the conferences to come. We commend you to listen and to find your place in the movement. Thank you, Bishop Barber, for coming today. And now let's commemorate, let's celebrate the homegoing together of the Congressman John Lewis.
The story is amazing and should be an inspiration to us all. Born February 21st, 1940, the youngest member of the leadership in the civil rights movement, John Robert Lewis was physically attacked, injured, and jailed on numerous occasions, all because he had the audacity to call for equal rights and voting rights for our people, Black people. He served in Congress for over 30 years and was known as the House's conscience. This week, and from now on, we will mourn the loss of this civil rights legend. And as a member of the AME 2nd Episcopal District, we want to celebrate his work and his legacy in our community. So please join us this week in prayer as we lay him to rest in memory. Congressman John Robert Lewis, civil rights legend, leader, brother, friend, role model, never to be forgotten by the 2nd Episcopal District of the African Methodist Episcopal Church.
I worked 41 years in the coal mines. I have black lung, and it's just unfathomable what these poor coal miners have to go through in order to get what they have worked for and deserve.
At one time, poverty was a temporary condition. You were on a down slope for a minute, but you could bounce back up. We can't bounce back up today. It's permanent. We're not going back to the factory and building cars and trucks like we once did.
A job working at McDonald's or the grocery store doesn't pay enough for one person to live.
We work a 40-hour work week, still not enough. Living from paycheck to paycheck. Rent is $600 a month. We got water bill, electricity. I do this for my kids, and it hurts.
We were in the height of mass water shutoffs. This entire neighborhood was shut off all at one time.
I saw all my neighbors get shut off right in front of me. It was kind of terrifying.
I'm 42 years old, and I'm a cashier at McDonald's.
I had lost my house.
You're welcome to come inside.
There's a lot of people that are living in their cars. You never notice until you're in the same situation.
I don't have stuff to give my children. I'm paying all these bills, and they need school clothes and stuff, and they be asking me for it. I can't give it to them.
I see poverty in my own community. You know, there's a 70% unemployment rate in the reservation right now.
Here in New York City, we're home to millionaires and billionaires, and we have so many people living in the street, and that's just not right.
I've been a homeless veteran twice, lived in a shelter.
I've been living down here since I was 17. I'm from Flint, Michigan. You can't imagine being in my footsteps. I have children who have never had the experience of drinking from the tap.
700,000 people in this country are on the verge of losing their food stamps.
This budget calls for shrinking the social safety net programs like Medicare.
I just know that everything that's happening to us isn't right.
I'm in stage 5 of kidney disease. I fell behind on my health care, and they canceled my health insurance, and they told me I have to wait until open enrollment. There's only 5 stages of kidney disease, and I'm in the 5th stage. Murder, it's murder. You know, if you ask me, it's murder.
I lost a son to gun violence, and I lost a daughter.
No parent should have, in America, should have to bury their child for a lack of medical expense. I'm wailing because my children,
my God,
are no more.
My God, Kevin.
I'm wailing, I'm wailing, because my babies ain't no more. How many more babies? How many more children?
No more.
It's always taken a moral movement to change America.
People of all races and creeds and colors and religions and ages and genders and sexualities. People are committing to building a moral fusion movement and building power.
Everybody say, I
believe that we will win.
I believe that we will win.
This movement is not about merely saving the Democratic Party or criticizing the Republican Party. This movement is about saving the soul of this nation.
We are rising up to fight poverty, not the poor.
Registering, educating people for the movement who vote.
I cannot stand here and claim to be a follower of Jesus Christ and be silent about the moral outrage that is going on in our country.
We have a moral crisis in this country.
Thank you, we love you. Thank you, we love you.
And any nation that ignores half of its people is in a moral and economic crisis.
Forward together, not one step back. There will be a movement that will break through the con and bring people together to save the heart and the soul of this democracy and this world.
Bishop Davis, I'm so humbled again to be with you all in the AME Church and in the 2nd Episcopal District. We give honor to God this morning and to His Son, Jesus Christ, and to the power of the Holy Spirit. I join with your district in honoring this morning the legacy of John Lewis and calling on all of us to not be what some are choosing to be in this moment in honoring him, who have stood and said how great he was, but when he was alive, they fought him on everything he stood for. We remember Jesus said, woe unto those who love the tombs of the prophets. We need in this moment to be those who understand that the greatest form of honoring someone, particularly prophetic voices, is to be imitators of the good parts of their life and their lives. And so I pray that we will do that. There is much work yet to be done. I greet all of you from North Carolina. I think, if I'm understanding correctly, I've been traveling all over via video by the directions of the bishop and my good friend, Reverend Lamar from Washington, D.C. These are serious times, as you saw in the video. People are in deep pain, but also people, clergy and all across this country are organizing. The Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, is also co-chaired by the Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris, Executive Director of the Kairos Center. I'm President, Senior Lecturer of Repairers of the Breach. I greet you on behalf of the 45 now state coordinating committees, the more than 20 denominational groups that support our work, 200 partners, and poor and low wealth people all across this country who decided to work together to shift the moral narrative and to build power in these times. This is serious business, very serious business. And I believe it is the work particularly of those of us of faith. The Bible is clear, and I want to talk about this morning, if we're truly concerned about Black Lives Matter, Black lives and that they matter, we must certainly be concerned about addressing systemic racism, systemic poverty, ecological devastation, the war economy, and the false moral narrative of religious nationalism. I said to some the other day on a press conference with MSNBC that if people wanted to really honor the legacy of John Lewis, the one thing they, and I think we ought to demand, is that the Congress immediately pass an omnibus bill. They have the authority to do this. And in that bill, it would include restoring the Voting Rights Act that he almost gave his life for, passing living wage, and passing universal health care. Those were three things that John Lewis believed were needed to be done, and the fact that they haven't been done represented a deep moral failure of this country in this particular moment. We must understand that and understand that he was connected to a movement. I was reading the other night that before John Lewis ever got to Selma, the Dallas County Voters League had been working there for more than 40 years. That James Bevel and of the SCLC doing his Alabama voting project and others were there before he got there. So he was a man of the movement. And he came there after Jimmy Lee Jackson had been shot by a police officer. And there was a decision to march to Montgomery carrying Jimmy Lee Jackson's body and to fight for voting rights. And the Dallas County Voter League invited Dr. King to come, and John Lewis was there when they made that invitation. And the rest, as we say, was history, as he, with many, many others, moved in step across the Edmonds-Pettus Bridge. The Bible tells us in Isaiah 10, verse 1, woe unto those who legislate evil and rob the poor of their rights. This is a preacher, this is Isaiah the prophet, talking in this manner in the 6th century BC and saying to us why the church and why the prophetic voice of the church cannot be left out of the public square. Woe unto those who legislate evil. Jeremiah 20 says, Jeremiah was told by God, go to the king's palace and tell them that this is the message of God. Attend to matters of justice, set things right between the people, rescue the victims and the immigrants from their exploiter and the poor. Don't take advantage of the homeless, the orphans, the widows, and stop murdering people with your policies. This is in the Message Bible. And then, of course, in the New Testament, we know that Jesus began his public ministry with these words, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me to preach good news to the poor. He was almost killed that day by the authorities and the forces of injustice because he dared to declare that the poor, or in Greek, the patokos, those who've been made poor, were in fact his focus, and liberation would be his work and the call of God. The poor, the broken, the blind, the oppressed, the prison, and those who've been made to feel unaccepted. And when he ended his ministry on the way to the cross, he declared that every nation, not individual, every nation would be judged by how it treats the least of these, the hungry, the homeless, the sick, the imprisoned, what those he declared the least of these. And so scriptural foundation lets us know that the work of justice, the work of challenging the society, not being the chaplain of society, but being the critique of society, is central to the Christian vocation. It is not on the margins, it's not an anomaly. There are more than 2,000 scriptures in the Bible that speak to the issue of how we treat the poor and the least of these, women, children, and immigrants. More than 2,000 scriptures. As a Bible and called the Poverty Justice Bible. And you go in, all those scriptures are marked, and on one occasion, some people cut each one of them out, and the Bible literally fell apart because they found that the only sin greater than the sin of not addressing the issues of poverty and injustice and oppression is the sin of idolatry. It is being what Psalms 14 calls a fool. That the fool says in his heart, there is no God. And then the next part of that text said, and because of that, they are corrupt. And corrupt there in Hebrew literally means those who use political power to hurt, damage, and destroy the life of those who are the oppressed and the poor in earth. In fact, later on in Psalms 14, it says that those who are corrupt and evil, they frustrate the possibilities and the plans of the poor. But they do it because they believe there is no God. And We know they believe there is no God by the actions they take toward the poor and the least of these. And that's why the scriptures call them fools, not because they are intellectually weak, but because they are morally weak. And their actions reveal, because there's no way, if they believed in God, if I might bring it to a contemporary place, that they would step on the poor and keep healthcare from the poor and keep wages from the poor. And there's no way you can believe in God and then be racist and think that somebody else is an animal and you are a human being simply because of the color of their skin. And so the Bible is clear, very clear, that the church must be engaged. And I believe in these times, our government's abandonment of the people in the midst of the greatest public health crisis in a century. And you ought to know we were going through this 100 years ago. In the time of Woodrow Wilson, he did the same thing the current president is doing. Woodrow Wilson was a racist. He played Birth of a Nation in the Oval Office, told all of his staff to engage in racist public policy. The swine flu hit America. He lied about it. He called it the Spanish flu to try to blame it on Spanish people. And because he ignored it, he caught it himself, and 650,000 people ended up dying. The same things that we're seeing today, we saw 100 years ago. And so in a real sense, we are facing the greatest public health crisis in a century, and an economic downturn that could rival the Great Depression. And the fact that the government has abandoned so many of the people is sin. It's not just bad public policy, it's sin of the highest order. The ancient words of the prophet Isaiah ring now with unnerving relevance today. Woe unto those who legislate evil and rob the poor of their rights. After another week of surging COVID-19 cases, Congress finished last Friday without passing a bill. Over the weekend, the $600 boost in federal unemployment began to time out, and the federal moratorium on evictions expired, putting up to 23 million Americans at risk of being homeless. This week, as millions wobble even closer to the cliff of economic ruin, hunger, sickness, and death, the Senate leadership returned with a proposal that would leave citizens and states with fewer protections and less money. And at the heart of this current deliberation, Bishop, is a disdain for the poor and for life itself that is not new, but rather an escalation of the federal response to the coronavirus so far. We've seen 3 pieces of pandemic legislation passed, 3 pieces prior to now. And sure, there's been some things in those 3 pieces that have kept millions afloat. But in all 3 of those pieces that were passed, they were temporary. Not one of them guaranteed sick leave. Not one of them guaranteed forgiveness of mortgages and rent during this period of time that other countries have actually done. And they have passed stimulus bills up to this point that smuggled in hundreds of billions of dollars in appropriations and tax cuts to the wealthy corporations and even the military while the people are suffering. Over $3 to $4 trillion went to the banks and corporations and the wealthy in the first 3 stimulus bills, not to the essential workers, not to the people working on the front line. 84% of all the money went to those who are already wealthy. And now Congress is still debating the merits of masks. We see congressional people walking around defying even having masks. Just yesterday, one of the main ones out of Texas was found that he had COVID-19. They are still talking about the virus will just, some of them are going away. Trump and McConnell casually stalls and belittles. They telling the country that our response should be tailored and targeted. And amid a growing depression that threatens every thread of the American tapestry, they continue to double down on the politics of austerity, proposing $200 unemployment benefits instead of the modest $600 funds for the, and are proposing legal help in the case of eviction rather than an extension of the federal moratorium on evictions and any form of rent cancellation. And instead of taking care of the people, McConnell is proposing liability shields for corporations and the government who are knowingly endangering people by forcing them back to work while not even increasing pay for millions of low-wage workers who we claim are on the combat field against pandemic, but they've not received any kind of raise or combat pay. That's why the scriptures speak to us now, woe unto those who legislate evil. Republican senators have put out a hateful lies, blaming poor people for the nation's botched response to the pandemic, declaring that people are making more staying home than they are going to work, which in itself actually proves how ugly this statement is, because if someone makes more on unemployment, which is in fact not true for the most part, but if they do, then that says they're working at a low wage, non-living wage paid job. And what it says about those who would say that, they would rather people work on low wage, non-living wage jobs than to pay them what they deserve. Even the other day, Democratic House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer had said that they're willing to sign a bill, or at least he is, that would in fact cut unemployment because we don't want people to be at home working. Why is it that when the rich, and this is a question the church must raise, are in need, they are never told they are asking too much? The wealthy, the greedy, the corporations are never told they are asking too much. In fact, they are given right off the bat more than what they even need. But when the poor ask for what Isaiah called their rights to survive, they are met with denigration cloaked in the language of sober pragmatism. We are in uncharted territory, my brothers and sisters. There have now been 19 consecutive weeks of unemployment claims, over 1 million, larger than any 1 week during 2007 and 2008 in the crisis, over 1 million a week, over 1 million in each week. The Department of Labor reports that over 35 million workers are either on unemployment benefits or have applied for them. This job crisis has devastated Black workers in particular, and Black people are dying because they are going to work. If we are moved by one person being murdered by a cop on a street corner as George Floyd will, we have to be deeply concerned about all of the people who are being literally killed by bad policy because they are going to work unprotected and without health care, without sick leave. But not only Black workers, this has found its way into every corner and community in the country. What this will mean for American life in the years ahead is catastrophic. Already, over 26 million people have lost their employer-sponsored insurance during the worst health crisis in at least a century. Think about that. In this country, we connect healthcare to people's jobs, not to their bodies, which means even before COVID, 80 million people who were already uninsured or uninsured, now added to that 80 million people are 26 million people who have lost their insurance because their jobs have laid them off or their jobs are no more. In June, 30% of all homeowners and renters failed to make housing payments, 30%. and massive waves of evictions are projected for this late summer and fall, hitting undocumented people, poor renters, and people of color first and worst. This is in a country, however, where before COVID ever hit, there was not one county in America where a person working a basic 2-bedroom, working a minimum wage job could afford a basic 2-bedroom apartment. And even before COVID, upwards of 9 million people were either homeless or on the verge of homeless. And if you think about what I'm saying to you now, we've not heard about this in our political debates. We've not heard about it sometimes in our pulpits and our churches, but it is time for the church to be fully engaged. A study back in March found that if poverty and unemployment reached Great Depression levels, 9.9 people could join the over 37 million people who face food insecurity in 2018. In 2018, 37 million people didn't know where they were going to get their next meal from. And in COVID, 9 million more people could be added to that. A more extreme scenario would raise hunger by 17 million people. It may be hard to believe, but 4 months after COVID, we've now surpassed even the metrics that had been projected in March. Before the pandemic hit, we were a nation riveted by poverty and inequality. Before COVID, I want you to hear me this morning, there were 140 million of our people who were poor and low income before COVID. In North Carolina, for instance, 49% of North Carolinians were poor and low income before COVID, 4.7 million residents. 39% of white people, 2.4 million people, 62% of people of color, 2.3 million people in North Carolina, even before COVID, were poor and low wealth. In this country, 61% of all Black people were poor and low wealth, 26 million people. And 66 million, or 30% of white people were poor and low wealth, even before COVID. In North Carolina, even before COVID, 9,000 people were homeless. Even before COVID, you could work a minimum wage job in North Carolina and it would take you 87 hours a week just to afford a basic 2-bedroom apartment. Before COVID, there were 62 million people in this country working without a living wage, and 2 million people in North Carolina working without a living wage. Many people poor and low wealth. They may not look like it on the outside, but the numbers tell us. Before COVID, 700 people were dying a day from poverty, 250,000 people a year. And now, because of the complete failure of leadership in our highest offices in this country, that we've had the highest COVID-19 death toll in the world, over 150,000 people, 1,000 people now dying a day, and Black and brown people are dying because they are working, and Native American people are dying because they are suffering on reservations long denied the basics for living. And we are facing spiking numbers at a time when other nations in both the global north and south are curbing new cases. And while this virus may be eventually tamed, our government's negligence will leave us with years of historic suffering and even longer lasting wounds. My daughter's a PhD in public health, and she's joined with 3 other PhDs in public health. I believe one of them is a member of the AME Church. She's a professor at Harvard, and another one a professor at UCLA. And they have all put out a paper saying that none of this had to be. That public health officials knew how to address COVID long before it came. But they didn't follow the models, they didn't follow the simulation, but more importantly, because of the deep fissures and wounds of systemic racism and poverty in this country, it is giving this germ more power because we refuse and have refused for years to fully address racism and poverty. We have everything we need to, we just do not have the moral will. That is why the church must be engaged. And in the midst of all of this, as we head to the polls, 26 states since 2013 have passed racist voter suppression laws. 26 states. And Senator McConnell has blocked fixing the Voting Rights Act that John Lewis fought for, that was gutted by the Supreme Court in 2013. Senator McConnell has refused to fix it for 7 years and over 2,500 days. And now, instead of working to fix and to fund access to the polls, Trump and McConnell are allowing more voter suppression and attempting to steal an election by any means necessary. And if you add to this that we currently spend $800 billion on the war economy, 54 cents of every discretionary dollar goes to the war economy, not to the soldiers and the troops, but to those who buy excess planes and trucks and tanks. We spend, if we cut our military budget in half, we would still be spending more money than Iran, Iraq, China, North Korea, and Russia combined. Just the other day in Congress, there was an attempt to get 10% of that budget turned toward this pandemic, just 10%, $80 billion, just 10%. Because we only spend 16 cents of every discretionary dollar on issues of healthcare and education and infrastructure and wages. We spend 54 cents on the war economy. So some legislators, Congress, we said, we just want 10%, $80 billion to turn toward COVID, to turn toward people in need. And it was voted down. Now then is the moment, my brothers and sisters, when we must challenge what I call the death measurement that is found in every form of our public policy. Every form of public policy that's negative has a death measurement. That is, people die. Black people die. People die. I call it the DM on the DL, the death measurement on the down low. We don't talk about it because we don't see it. We don't see it because it's not on camera. But the denial of health care causes 5,600 people to die for every 1 million people that don't have health care. The denial of living wages, denial of addressing poverty and having safety nets causes 700 people to die a day from poverty, 250,000 a year. The denial of voting rights allows people to get elected or selected, not really elected, because of voter suppression. And once they get elected, then they vote to deny health care, to deny living wage, and those things kill people, which is a violation of our promise of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and is surely a violation of our deepest biblical calls. Our biblical calls to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly before our God. And so on this coming Monday, first time I'm announcing this, Bishop, our faith leaders, and I hope the AME Church can find a way to have some pastors join us, faith leaders with the Poor People's Campaign will gather in DC to remind McConnell and the Senate that it is treacherous and heretical, it's mean, it's a form of misery and mayhem to hold up the Constitution and the Bible and while trampling on the rights of poor people and refusing to do right by them. We will be maintaining social distancing. We'll be maintaining covering. We're asking for a couple of hundred clergy to join us. You can get information, I'll tell you where in a minute. Bible in one hand, Constitution in the other, a placard on us like the placards that they walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And we're going to deliver hundreds of Bibles to McConnell and to the Senate and others because it seems as though they're not reading either one of them. And we know it is sin. It's not just bad public policy, it's sin. And we're walking there in the safest way possible to demand a true relief bill, one that guarantees health care and adequate income, protects housing, water, and utilities, and prioritizes the needs of the poor and not the wealthy and corporations. The church cannot be silent in this moment. We must call this nation to repentance and reconstruction. Where we are now is not because of the inevitable hand of God, but the sinful injustice of man. And I know some will say, yeah, brethren, but the Bible says the poor will be with you always. But that's a half quote of the scripture. If you go back to where it came from in Deuteronomy, it says the poor will be with you always, and then it gives the reason. And the reason is because of the injustices and the corrupt actions of humanity. It is not the inevitability of God. And that scripture does not let us off the hook. In fact, like Jesus, we must preach good news to the poor. The church must challenge the entire system to change. We will never be the beloved community until we lift and care for the poor, and we lift from the bottom. We can no longer allow the narrative in this country, the political narrative, to only include the wealthy and the middle class. We can no longer, in any of our spaces, I'm a pastor myself, not address the issues of poverty and call our people to action on a regular basis, not just on MLK Sunday, because our people are dying and suffering every day. In the Poor People's Campaign, we've also put together a moral agenda for the healing of the nation, because we can't just curse the darkness. One of your own, the Reverend Casimir Brown, is now the National Director for Religious Affairs, and she's a part now of pushing this moral agenda for the healing of the nation, a Jubilee Justice budget from the poor. This Healing of the Nation platform is designed to address systemic racism, systemic poverty, ecological devastation, the war economy, and the false moral narrative of religious nationalism. If you go to www.june 2020, you can find it there. If you go to www.breachrepairers.org, you can find it there. It is comprehensive, put together by poor and low-wealth people and some of our best economists and sociologists and political scientists in this country. Nobel Peace Prize economist Joseph Stiglitz helped to guide us through his writings, and my conversations with him. One of his books says the cost of inequality. We must deal with the cost of inequality, because the cost of keeping things unequal is more than the cost to fix them. 2 weeks ago on June 2020, 3 million people on social media alone heard from poor and low wealth people, their allies, and heard about this agenda. And hundreds of thousands sent copies of it to every congressperson and governor in this country. This past Sunday, we want you to join with us. We launched what is called the We Must Do More tour. We must do more, mobilizing, organizing, registering, educating people for the movement who vote. 100 days from the election. And we are looking for 1,000 churches as a minimum that will commit to register and move 1,000 people to the polls. We know we could get more, but if that happened, that's over 1 million new people being moved to the polls. And we know the past election in this country was determined by only 79,000 votes in 3 states. And we know 100 million people chose not to vote in the last election. And we know that many of them did not vote, poor and low wealthy, because they never hear their issues or hear their names called. Remember, John Lewis, who is being buried today, was a part of a movement, not a lone individual, who led the movement. He led a 3-month campaign after the death of Jimmy Lee Jackson and then the death of Reverend James Reed. They marched to Montgomery. They spent many, many days on it, that we might march to the polls. And voting is not the end of everything, but it must be a part of it. We're releasing a groundbreaking report as I conclude the Poor People's Campaign and the Columbia School of Social Work. And this report will show empirically what we've always known. And that is that the stone that the builders rejected have become the chief cornerstone. That is that the poor and low income people, those that Ezekiel described in the Valley of Dry Bones, now in America have the potential to lead a reconstruction by forming a new, counterintuitive, and generationally transformative electorate. Dr. King told us at the end of the Montgomery March that the reason poor Black people and white people are always divided by the greedy aristocracy is because they fear the power of poor and low income Black people and white people coming together. And now the numbers actually show us that poor white, poor Black, and poor Latinos coming together with moral and religious leaders now have the power, to the numerical power to change the political calculus in this country, particularly if they do it around an agenda. The report will show that if the 34 million poor and low income eligible non-voters, 34 million poor and low income eligible non-voters had been engaged in 2016, that election at the same rate as higher income voters, they would have exceeded the margin of victory in the presidential race and in 16 Senate elections. In other words, if the 34 million poor and low income people were reached and talked to and engaged, they could fundamentally change the presidential election, fundamentally change the election in the Senate and any race in this country. And when we know 61% of African Americans are poor and low wealth, we know we have work to do. We know that in 16 Senate elections, including all of the key battleground states, this report now shows that modest change, just 10 or 15, 20%, not 100%, just 10, 15, 20% of poor and low wealth people who've not voted coming to the polls could fundamentally shift the electorate. And the same is true in 2020, what could have been true in 2016. And so if we organize and we vote and then stay engaged, the church can never just be about voting and going home. We must stay engaged. Our prophetic calling says, go down to the king's house, go down to the ruler's house. Now, as I close, Bishop, today, in Hebrew, the word for vote and the word for voice are the same word. I didn't know that till I spent some time studying ancient Hebrew texts with rabbis. The word for vote and the word for voice is the same word, kol, K-U-L. It says that in the Bible, when it says, and the voice of God, that's kol. When the voice of God thunders against injustice, that's kol. But also when the prophets say, thus saith the Lord, that's kol. When they speak what the voice of God tells them to speak, that's kol, kol, kol. And that word is the same word for vote. So our vote is our voice. Our vote is our voice. And our vote ought to say that we demand that this nation do right by the poor. Our vote says something. It's theological, it's not just political. Our vote should say that we demand the nation provide health care for the sick and relief to the poor and living wages to the workers who deserve the labor is worthy of their high. Our vote should say we are against racism, against Black people and against Latino people and Native people. Our voices should say we challenge those who would give a free pass to corporate polluters that are destroying our community. Our voices should say we will not sit silently while we see more money put into militarism and the war economy than into dealing with the injustices in our community. Our vote is our voice, and our voice is our vote. So not only do we have to vote at the polling place, we have to raise our prophetic voice. We have to raise the voice of our vote. We have to be engaged. We have to shift this narrative from the pulpit to the public square. We must challenge those who legislate evil, and we must preach good news to the poor. And when we do this, then we move this nation closer to becoming a more perfect union. But more importantly, we move it more closer to being the place where justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. So in this moment, Bishop, you are right, I believe in all my heart, to talk about Black Lives Matters and how we must be engaged in the community. And if I would just add one addendum, this work is not side work. It's not on the margin work. It is at the center of the heart of what it means to be Christian. One of my dear professors, the Reverend Dr. William Turner, used to tell us in the class on pneumatology. Dr. Turner would say, you can call it whatever you want to call it about your salvific experience. You can say your dungeon shook and your chains fell off, like the founder of the AME Church. You can say you were sprinkled You were immersed. You were washed in the blood. You were filled with the Holy Ghost. You were transformed. You were redeemed, however you want to say it. But if whatever that salvific experience was, if it doesn't produce a quarrel with the world's injustices, if it doesn't produce a quarrel with the world's oppressions, then your claim of having a Holy Spirit Christian experience is terribly suspect. Let us leave no doubt in this moment, because every nation has its slavery, has its Edmund Pettus Bridge. Every nation had, every generation has its slavery moment, has its abolition period, has its Edmund Pettus Bridge. In other words, every generation has its moment where it must decide whether we're going to believe the religion of the slave master and the oppression, or whether we're going to live out the Christianity of Jesus Christ. In this moment, let there be no doubt that we will not be those who merely love the tombs of the prophets, but that we will carry forth the prophetic tradition and do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly before our God. And we will preach good news to the poor, relief to the captive, and declare the acceptable year of the Lord. And we will do it and change this nation, because things do not have to be the way they are. Bishop, thank you for allowing me to have this time. I hope that your Episcopal District got those emails, www.June2020, www.breachrepairers.org, and also that they go there, they can find everything I've said in writing with footnotes, because the last thing you want to be is loud and wrong. So we have footnotes, we have studies on all of this, because this is a time that we must be extremely serious and focused. Too many people are dying, too many people are hurting, and it doesn't have to be this way. God bless you, sir.
Bishop Barber, as has been the case in these last 3 annual conferences, again, I express our appreciation to you for your coming to help to keep us woke, to awaken those who may have lulled off to sleep, but to make all of us aware that each of us has a responsibility, and this is not the time for us to abandon that responsibility individually or collectively. Thank you. If you would take just a second, I know that your schedule is extremely busy, but if you would take just a second, as we will allow 3 questions from the conference to come your way. And certainly we look forward to your being a part of the final conference on next week. But right now, if you would take just a moment, if you have that time, to entertain at least 3 questions from our conference, if there are questions.
Yes, sir.
I call upon Reverend Janice Harris now, who's receiving the Q&A. And if you have relevant questions that Bishop Barber can answer or would be willing to answer, we welcome them at this time. Reverend Harris, are there questions in the queue?
Yes, Dr. Smallwood Moore, she asked if Dr. Barber could speak more on a pastoral care perspective. Can you speak to the God divine movement in the midst of this pandemic, specific God justice towards the disenfranchised?
I think what I want to say, and what I've learned from studying theologically, my background is pastoral care and public policy. And one of the things I've learned, there's a book called Pastoral Care and Public Policy, actually. And in that book, the writer says that if you care about people pastorally, you have to be engaged prophetically and prophetic social justice issues, because the pastoral issues that many of our people have grow out of the injustices that are created in society. The depressions, the hurt, all of the things that we counsel people about. Pastorally, Many of those things grow out of the disparities that we face. And so what has happened too often is people have tried to separate priestly, pastoral, and prophetic. And they'll say, well, I choose to be priestly, but I'm not really in the prophetic. Well, the Holy Ghost is not schizophrenic. And Jesus represented all of that, and so must we. Pastors, I believe, if we look at the role of the pastor and the shepherd and the one who protects the flock, has to be engaged priestly, pastorally, and prophetically. I mean, I often teach this in a group. How can we ask, for instance, people to tithe, but then not be fighting for them to have a living wage? How can we ask people to serve and then not be fighting for them to have health care so that they can have the health that they need to serve? In very practical ways, not to engage in transforming society to be more just is a form of a theological heresy and pastoral malpractice. And I know enough about the AME Church from its inception that the church not only cared for the people internally, but also challenged the society that externally that was impacting the people. And you all began challenging the original sin of this country, which is racism, that caused both the genocide of Native people and the genocide of far too many Africans and former slaves. Lastly, the part of that question about the pandemic, you know, we have to be careful in how we talk about it, because we don't want to in any way suggest from an arrogant standpoint that God, you know, has created the pandemic, because we're talking about a lot of innocent people who are dying. But the fact of the matter is, theologically and biblically, we do know that pestilence, whenever they come in the Bible, there's not a scripture in the Bible where pestilence came where it did not come in a time of bad and oppressive leadership. And oftentimes innocent people are hurt in that. I believe God cares for them, and I know God does in Zion and in heaven. But pestilence come not just because something is out of order in the bios, but something is out of order in the polis, in the politics. In the scriptures, every time pestilence come, it signals the need to change the direction of the nation and to change leadership. And I don't just mean the current leadership that's sitting in the Oval Office, even though that's bad, but we have to realize that something is off in this nation when 50 some years after Dr. King's death, we have 15 million more poor people than we did then. When too much of the things our politicians are fighting for today, 3 months or 4 months ago, they were saying we couldn't afford it. I mean, you have people today fighting for health care and fighting for living wages, and 3 years ago, three or 4 months ago, they were saying that was too radical. This pestilence is forcing us to have to deal with how we are at risk. We have a national security breach because we've allowed too much racism and too much poverty to exist far too long. My prayer in this moment is that we get it, because if we can't get it right in the midst of a pandemic of both racism, poverty, and a major germ, then God help us as a nation. This is a moment we are being forced in some ways. We're in the midst of tribulation and transition, tribulation and transformation. And that is why the church's voice must be in the midst of this moment. And our call for this country, for this nation, for our unjust political systems to be changed, and for repentance to happen, and for reconstruction and revival and moral revolution to occur.
All right, thank you, Reverend Harris. Is there one other question?
Bishop, while it's coming, I do want to remind folk that, if you let somebody contact me, I'll get it to them. We'll have Reverend Casimir get it to them. But on Monday, maintaining social distancing, not asking anybody to come and drive into the city of DC, mask, black gloves, a group of pastors and the Methodist bishop there in that region, the United Methodists, has joined the Episcopal bishop, the one that oversees St. John Church right there in front of the White House. I'd surely offline would love to speak with you, and your people have my number. But we're organizing a group of several hundred clergy who will be 12 feet apart, who will have a mass, but who each will have a Bible and a Constitution on. Will walk to Senator McConnell leaders off building. We're not going inside, and demand prayerfully that we stop blocking what is needed in this moment to address this pandemic, particularly among poor people and working people. This is not riotous. It's not any way we're nonviolent, but it is a statement. It is like when Jeremiah, they broke the wooden yoke and he came back with the iron yoke and said, "Woe unto you." And it's important that we say that. If people may not change, but it's important that they know that they cannot say they were not warned. They cannot say that there was not a prophetic voice among them. And so I'll get the number to your people and they can share it if you have any, and if you allow that. We're not breaking our quarantines and none of that. We're not asking anybody to do that. It's only volunteer, only if you can, and only if people maintain strict social distancing. It's not, we're not crowdsourcing, trying to have a bunch of folk. And we're committing to deliver. We're going to have FedEx too. We're going to take some hundreds of Bibles and Constitutions, because some of us have said they cannot be reading either one. There's no way you could be reading the Bible and reading the Constitution that says establishment of justice, and in the midst of a pandemic blocking healthcare and throwing people out of their homes. That's just ungodly. It's just mean, to be tried honest. And it's important that we say that and say it to the media. They may not change, but we at least have to offer them repentance, and they at least have to know that the church and religious community was not silent, and that there has been a prophetic voice among them in this moment. And McConnell particularly, because he claims to be such a person of faith, but his actions are far from the faith that we know in Jesus Christ.
And we will certainly have our delegated leadership to make us, put us in contact with you sometime today or tomorrow to make sure that we are involved in the way in which would be most helpful to ensure the success of your effort. Thank you, Reverend Harris. Is there another? Just one more.
There's no more questions.
All right. Bishop Barber, again, thank you so very much for coming. You always inspire us. We always feel a sense of anxiousness to get involved after hearing you speak. Thank you for your factual information. Thank you for your motivational information. Thank you for the sensitivity that you bring to this process that makes each of us know that we must get involved and our individual contributions are necessary. And so every person in the conference, if you would, right where you are, so that everybody in your house will hear, please put your hands together and applaud this concern and the presentation on the part of Bishop Barber. Would you do that? God bless you, Bishop, as you travel today and throughout this weekend. God bless you.
God bless you.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. As a part of what we know is necessary, and the whole idea from beginning to end has been designed to make sure that every single person in the district, regardless to age, know where you can get involved and to inspire you to get involved. The one thing that we are guilty of sometimes is waiting on somebody else to do what we ought to be doing for ourselves. And in order for us to be a part of the history of movement and making and encouraging and helping change to come, we need to find our place in history. And so as we developed some months ago now, what we have called and what they've called, designed to call themselves as a result of putting it out for consensus, Faith and Fairness and Justice Task Force, headed up by two of the young giants of the district that are well-read, well-informed, and certainly socially active, the Reverend Matthew Wadley and the Reverend Dr. William Lamar. And they coordinate the process, but there are representatives from every one of the conferences to make sure that we don't miss the uniqueness of the problems in that area. We know that there are global concerns and there are national concerns, but we want very much for you to make sure that we don't miss the local concerns, because this house is built from ground up and not from roof down. And so I call on Reverend William Wadley now, who will introduce the process and what we have done thus far. And then I recognize Reverend Teresa Holmes, Reverend Knox, and others who have come for the presentation, short presentation of what happens in your own communities and how we might be involved. Reverend Wadley, please come to the platform.
Great. Bishop, I want to thank you for your leadership. The conference should know that the Bishop acted immediately upon the shifting circumstances to organize us and to organize our efforts, and we are much better stead and positioned because of his forthright leadership. So I want to thank you on behalf of the district for being so proactive. Within the last 3 hours, I feel like a news commentary, within the last 3 hours, the case for why this work is so essential has been coming into stark relief. As Congressman John Lewis is being laid to rest and his legacy is now in our hands, it's been released that the GDP of America has dropped to the lowest point ever, the largest drop in a quarter in our history. At the same time, Herman Cain has died after attending the Trump rally, and Trump has just put on Twitter that he thinks it's a good idea to delay the election in the fall and in the upcoming months. So the work that we're about and talking about right now literally could not be more crucial. Let me jump in very quickly to just encourage every pastor and layperson listening that your church plays a vital role in the national and local struggle of our people and for fairness and justice in this country. And we want you to feel empowered to know that just as we're seeing individual pastors, not megachurch pastors, but individual pastors of AME churches like Robert Turner there in Tulsa, Oklahoma, having both a local and national and international impact because of his willingness to stand up to the injustices that we're facing right now. So we want to encourage you to theologize to your congregations and to engage with other grassroots organizations, which may not be based in the church, but will benefit greatly by our capacity and our abilities, our relationships and our experience. And then to create a pastoral vision for what it looks like to move forward with all of the uncertainty of this time. Your church can plan protests and march, but it also can engage with local, state, and federal electoral officials. And one of the things we should note about that is that when you're talking about engaging in electeds, you don't have to necessarily be a member of their constituency. All of us can call Mitch McConnell's office because we're all citizens of this country and he speaks for the majority in the Senate. And so everyone can participate, and encouraging your people to get involved in the issues of police reform, voting, education, economics is crucial, and we'll talk more about that in just a second. Using social media platforms also is essential. All of us have been shut down physically, and so we're now online. And online now is where a major part of the movement is happening. And so engaging your congregation, engaging younger generations to help move the message forward is crucial. That's how information is being spread and how people are organizing. Again, the president, the one, number 45, has just openly said that it may be a good idea to delay the election, which obviously is nothing but a brazen power grab. But we also know that the largest voter suppression apparatus that's ever been assembled in our history is now at work trying to dispel people from exercising their rights of suffrage. And so we really want to encourage everybody, again, as churches and individuals, go to protectvoting.org, and you can see practical ways that you can impact and ensure, and certainly, especially in North Carolina, which is a battleground, that the rights that our forefathers and mothers fought for will be able to be actualized. We also know that much of what's happening right now spurred from the tragic murder and unjust murder of George Floyd. And so we don't want to lose the issue of police brutality in all this. And one of the methods that is being used is to take the President Obama's task force guidelines. They're basically best practices that every policing jurisdiction in this country should be held to this standard, at least, as we're talking about even major and other reforms. Basically, there are 18,000 police jurisdictions in this country, all of them operating by their own standards. And it's only at the local level that you can bring these things into compliance with best practices. And so there also is the Harris Senate bill, which is being co-sponsored by Karen Bass and the Congress, as well as Cory Booker in the Senate. That is an omnibus bill, which basically means not only does it carry with it the force of law in terms of changes and guidelines, but it also provides funding to enforce those changes. So we want to encourage you again, that is being debated right now. And so we really want to encourage you to weigh in with all the members in the Senate. And then finally, the census. With all that's going on, the 2020 census is going to determine for the next 10 years where resources are allocated from. And we also know that Black and Brown communities are the least likely, because of legitimate concerns around what government has done, to engage. But failure to engage means that we are sealing our own fates, because a lot of the legislative decisions, both federal and locally, are determined by the data mined by the census. And so again, make sure that you complete the census form, but also that you are helping others in your community to do that as well. And they're actually still hiring persons as well. So if you've been displaced or know people who've been displaced from work, then this is your opportunity to help to find them or to find for yourself employment. We're going to turn the balance of the presentation over to Reverend Dr. Terrence Holmes, Teresa Holmes, Reverend Knox, and Reverend Davis.
Okay, I wanted to just say thank you so much, Bishop, for giving me the opportunity to serve, and it will be Reverend Ronald Davis that will present as well. One of the possible local partners would be the local NAACP and the democracy.org or North Carolina. The members of the NAACP work with churches in their community and support the efforts of Democracy North Carolina, which produces a voter guide that is distributed to organizations and individuals. Democracy North Carolina provides printed materials or downloads that can be used to educate membership. The NAACP will conduct voter registration. They do phone, banking, canvassing, candid forums, and speak with their respective community. And then every county that has Sunday votings has Souls to the polls where the local NAACP encourages houses of faith to have their members to go and vote after church. And some of the churches that have partnered there in New Hanover County will be St. Stephen's, New Kelly Chapel, Mount Zion, Mount Olive, Mount Carmel, and Kendall Chapel. Another one possible partner would be the Advanced Carolina. It is an African-American-led 501c4 organization whose objective is to increase community awareness and political power in 16 selected counties in North Carolina. So you might want to check to see if your county would be one of them. Then we have the League of Women Voters, which is a group that provides education through lunchtime seminars. They are really, really interested in partnering with the African-American organizations because they are primarily white females. And then lastly, there is the Second Chance Alliance. The North Carolina Second Chance Alliance is a statewide alliance of people with criminal records, their family members, service providers, congregations, community leaders, and concerned citizens who have come together to identify and speak out in support of fair chance practices, policies, and laws that ensure people who's exiting within the criminal justice system, that they will have a fair chance to be prosperous and law-abiding citizens, which will include their right to vote. And then also we want to make sure that we connect and stay connected with our national organizations like the Poor People's Campaign and the National NAACP, along with the National Urban League. At this time, I'm going to ask Reverend Ronald Davis if he will come now and share what our second issues are.
Our second issues are educational internet access for students. In North Carolina, a number of children who live in rural areas suffered tremendously with their grades during COVID-19. It was particularly partly because of, one, not having access to a computer, and two, not having internet service or having computers, but not high-speed internet access, which was very much needed. Therefore, we suggest churches partner with the following: local school districts, corporations with community support programs such as Google and Spectrum. Churches can become hotspot hubs for internet access to students. And another group we are trying to partner with is OneChristianNetwork.com. This Christian-based organization network with businesses and churches with the sole intent of sharing the word of God, as well as providing resources to families who are in need of the bare necessities of food, clothing, shelter, and etc. They provide assistance throughout the entire year. We are hoping to have conversation concerning ways of assisting students whose parents are choosing to do virtual learning. Also, it's important issues in our community is the state and local election. We know that these elections take place every year, and those elections officials, elected officials, will make policies that will directly affect what happens in our community. So please make sure to vote during those times as well, and not just vote during the presidential election. Moratorium on eviction proceedings during COVID-19 crisis. We know that persons are at risk or being evicted from their homes. So we have to keep a watch on what's being done. Right now, it's a showdown between the parties. People are still out of work, and if they are out of work, how can they pay rent or mortgage? We want to make sure we keep a watchful eye on this situation. The censors participation, we asking that you please be encouraged to fill out the census. You can go online, you can call, or you can mail the card in, because it helps to make sure that money are allocated to our community fairly. Healthcare in the Black community. When it comes to our healthcare and health issues, we are the leading race, but in a negative way. As a community, and yet as individuals, somehow we got to take a hard and long look at what we are consuming and do better so we can be and feel better. Police reform. We don't need to deform the police, but we do need to hold them accountable by making sure policies are put in place and act upon fairly. The internet accessibility, low-income communities, we've already discussed that. And so we'll move on to the judicial system, the African-American representatives and influence. We want to make sure that we have representation and influence from people of color who have the courage to stand up against the injustice that we see in our court system. And lastly, holding local school boards accountable. Just as we hold our elected state and local officials accountable, we must hold our school boards accountable also. We want our children to have a great education, so we must make sure to hold them accountable to what they say they're going to do, especially for schools in rural areas. This is our report, unless Reverend Watley has something to add.
No, sir. Thank you.
All right, I want to thank you, and I want to thank the efforts of the leadership of the task force, but more particularly, I want to thank them for the timeliness in which they keep up with every movement of our country and the movement within the boundaries of our communities and how these movements are affecting us directly. Thank you. I did not know of the death of, I did not know of the death until you said that just then. And certainly we appreciate everything that you've brought to bear for us today. Thank you. Keep on doing what you're doing. My brothers and sisters, let me appeal one more time, because the whole idea, as I've said before, is making sure you understand the necessity of getting involved. Not just your pastor, not just the chair of your steward board, not just the leadership, but you have to find your place to get involved. During the planning meeting, there will be a number of suggestions that are brought from not only our task force and community, but brought from our denomination as well. And so during that time, we're going to spend more time from the task force helping us to figure out our way forward. And I certainly hope that you've taken this moment seriously. There is nothing more serious now than making sure that we change the rules of who lives in public housing on Pennsylvania Avenue. And so please, please take it seriously. I have not heard enough said about the census reports. Please go and fill them out. God, you can do so much with just the power that's already in your hands. We're complaining about a lot, but you can do a whole lot just by doing the stuff that's in your control. Go vote. Fill out the census report. Go to the school board meetings. Make sure that you are on it when it comes to county government meetings. Make sure that you keep up with your own community. Every aspect, you can make the difference. You are the bridge. You are the authentic church. The church building is not, you are. And so I pray and hope that you will take your responsibility seriously. Again, Reverend Watley, thank you. True enough, you have blessed us even in the sermon that you preached a few days ago. And this leap of faith is where we are right now. We're still leaping. We're still believing that the miracle and the blessing is in the leap. Thank you again. Thank you. Put your hands together for all of those who have made contributions this morning and how grateful we are to each and every one of them. All right. Our next, we are ready now to take our break from this process, and we encourage you, before you leave, hear the instructions for the next session, hear the instructions from the next section. So don't turn off your apparatuses, but in fact, keep them on. We're going to ask you to change platforms after this is over with so that you can join the Women's Missionary Society at 12 noon. They will begin their worship experience. I encourage you to be there. We can't do anything apart. We can make everything happen if we're together. So go and be supportive of the WMS. They have done a tremendous job all throughout the Episcopal District and all the things that they have been sensitive to in days gone by. Thank you again. Repeat after me. Every member a Christian, every Christian a worker, every worker trained, every trained worker saved. This we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless. See you at 12 for the Women's Missionary service.
Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you've enjoyed our discussions with the Conference Institute on social relevant issues, as well as our segment on Faith and Fairness and Justice Task Force. Don't change that channel. Stay tuned. Stay tuned. Stay tuned. Up next, after our brief 30-minute break, we'll view the always inspiring Women's Missionary Society's WMS Annual Night in White worship experience that captures our souls. 11:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Following this dynamic presentation, guess what? A leisurely 60-minute break. Before you dash out, would you like to know what's coming up next after your break? Our next business session continues at 1:36 p.m. Get ready. Next, we have more committee reports and virtual pastors reports. Times have changed, and so have the reports. Yes, we have the numbers that tell a story. Beyond the numbers, we have innovation, how worship and study changed. Behind the numbers, we have preparation. What makes online ministry possible? Before the numbers, we have information, how technology extends to new audiences. Between the numbers, we have transformation, why gospel focus must remain. After the intermission,